Are you looking for more out of your life? Do you need ideas on how to start new businesses and how to move forward in your own personal life? Well, guess what? You have come to the right radio show. At You Can Overcome Anything podcast show, you will learn and hear from many people from all walks of life who are sharing their challenges, their stories, the habits, and the mind shifts they had to overcome to become who they are today. On top, you will get a chance to connect and see how you can overcome anything by networking and learning about your next move through this radio show. I present to you our great speakers at You Can Overcome Anything podcast show with your host, Cesar Espino. Hello there and welcome back to another episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. It is your host, Cesar Espino. And today I have a special guest. Her name is Connie Dowell. How are you, Connie?
I'm doing great. How are you, Cesar?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for being here. And I want to just kind of give a quick overview to our listeners and viewers of who you are and kind of go from there, right? So Connie is an author of the Cozy Mysteries and nonfiction for writers, as well as an editor and book coach. She hosts books, Echoes, and a podcast about making and selling great books while building a workable creative life. When not working, she's raising two preschoolers and playing violin heavily, right? So that's amazing. And what I want to dive into is really talk about here my note shows that you and your family had gone through a very challenging time when the Hurricane Harvey hit your town and you literally lost everything, right? So before we dive into that, tell me more about Connie. Where were you originally born and what is your upbringing?
Well, I grew up in Georgia and I lived there until my husband got a job. We met in college and he got a job up in Virginia, and there I spent most of my adult life in Virginia, except for those 2 years in Houston, Texas. Yeah.
Got it. So let's talk about when you were growing up, did you ever had an idea of, who you wanted to be as you grew up? We always have as kids have this idea of, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a writer, I want to be whatever the case may be. What was your idea as a kid of who you wanted to become?
Well, I was apparently born knowing I wanted to be a writer. It was the thing I did from the moment I was old enough to pick up a pencil, is to create the books out of like computer paper and staples and make the thing I was so obsessed with.
Got it. So that kind of already came as part of your DNA and genetics. Huh? That's awesome. And so growing up, did you ever had any challenges growing up, either as a kid or in middle school, high school?
I think all kids do growing up. Growing up is hard, but compared to most, my childhood was pretty easy and I'd say supportive. I had my family is very active in the arts and small business, and so that part of being an author was sort of instilled into me from an early age as well.
Yeah. Okay, that's awesome. So let's talk about this experience that you had, right? So Hurricane Harvey hit and pretty much left you and your husband struggling in taking care of two kids that were under 3 in just an apartment. You lost everything. Pretty much, literally, you were left with nothing, right? And so let's talk about that experience, and I want to learn about some of the lessons and what that meant to you now too.
Yeah, it was really an alien experience because we had just moved to Houston. We knew almost nobody, and in like less than 2 months of moving there, we lost almost all of our stuff. Anything that wasn't on the second floor. We had this lovely setup and a townhouse that we'd taken all this time to pick out. That was gone, and we suddenly had to just be crammed into whatever apartment we could find. And I was trying for the the first time, like having no network, trying to still write, trying to raise the kids in this kind of, frankly, kind of crummy, bug infested apartment with no furniture. Um, so yeah, that was more than a bit of a challenge. Simply getting through the day when you don't really have anything, and just trying to corral very small children that want to get into everything was consumed most of my time.
Yeah. And so, and the reason you guys moved there was because your husband have gotten a job, or what was the reason you guys moved to?
Yeah, it was for a job.
Yeah. So, what was one of the lessons? Obviously, it was unfortunate that you had just moved into this new city, and then within 2 months, this natural disaster happens, and nothing you can do. You couldn't control that. Yet it happened, and it wiped you out, right? So, were there any lessons though that you can go back now and look at that and say, well, this is where I learned from that lesson? And the reason why I ask, and I want to get your opinion on this, is because a lot of times I feel that we as people go through so many different challenges throughout our lives, right? And we tend to look at the negative aspect of that without realizing that, in my opinion, everything we'll go through, there is a lesson to be learned. There's something that we can take from that can help us in our future, right? Somehow. And sometimes we may not see it that second or that moment, or while you're going through all of that, yet I do believe that there's something to that. So what about you? How was that for you?
Yeah, and I see what you're saying about not seeing it in the moment, because I definitely did not see any potential positive impact in the moment, for like even the months that stretched out afterwards as we were trying to rebuild. Because to me at the time, it looked like a massive failure to bounce back, a massive failure to handle for the first time, because our daughter was very newly born when all this happened, to handle motherhood and writing, to handle the things that could come my way, because I actually stopped writing for a time. But when I look back on it, I see that stopping, and then the struggle that it took to build back up that stamina to do it, was character building. And it's something that I've relied on as COVID has turned our lives upside down a couple of different times this past year. Once you've gone through a difficult experience and you can build yourself back up to a level of competence and productivity, to some, not really balanced, because there is no such real thing, but to something approaching balance, when something else strikes, you can do it again.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's definitely powerful. And I like that, character building, and you have to, you're right. Once you go through something like that, you want to find a way on how you can create that character building. And you said something else that kind of, trigger another aspect, and that's, you saw that as a major failure at that time. And I believe that, and I want to get your opinion on this, I believe that there's really no failures in life. They're really more just lessons, right? A lot of people might think, well, I just failed at doing this or failed at doing that, whatever the case may be. It comes down to me is that it's a lesson. It's a lesson, right? It's something that that you can pick up and do it better. And if you're not failing, or if you're not if you're not stumbling against something, then you're really not growing, right? Because I think that from pain, or from failure, if you want to call it failure, from those lessons, then you can actually grow, right? And I always talk about, from pain, a purpose can be born from that purpose, right? How do you see that in your experience?
Yeah, there's definitely a purpose that can come out of a difficult experience like this. I think for me, and probably for a lot of people, it's wanting to reach back and help others who had kind of similar experiences, whatever the challenge might be. For me, it's helping other writers. It's something that became a big driver for me, is to help other writers, and especially other writers who are parents and might be struggling, because that's the kind of experience that I lived through, and well, we all still live through it for the
Yeah.
18 years as we raise our kids. And I think that's one everyone will have a different answer, but that's one kind of passion that can be born out of pain. Well, the passion to pursue whatever it is that's driving you out, and a passion to help other people.
Yeah, yeah, and then going back to that passion too, like you talked about character building, and you talked about how you had to put yourself together, back into a position where you were working a lot, regularly working a lot, and since then you've been able to publish 3 books. And so when you think of getting back to work and just focusing on that, building yourself back again, and that passion, what was your driving factor? What was that said, you know what, I'm not going to accept the things that happened to me. Rather, I'm going to make a change, or I'm going to create this character building, and so on and so forth. What was that driving factor that got you to that level?
It's hard to say what the tipping point is, like
Mm-hmm.
in the moment, but for me, because I had that drive to tell stories so young, this was a part of my identity, and that's why like it felt like such an utter failure of who I was,
Mm.
when everything kind of pushed me to a point that I stopped. And for a month afterwards, as we tried to rebuild, I stopped. And that's, so I don't really know exactly what
Mm-hmm.
that moment was, but because I at some point realized I can't not be a writer, I can't not write and be happy. I have to do this hard thing. I have to learn how to work in different ways.
Got it. Talking about writing and just what you just mentioned is another thing that I believe people who are listening to and watching this, you got to take account for that. And you said, I cannot write and not be happy, and I'm going to use be happy as the key word here, or a fundamental element here, because a lot of times, again, we go to works that we're not happy with. We go to work, or we're doing things that doesn't really fit with what we perceive as being happy, right? And so you got to find your passion. You got to find that one thing that makes you feel good, because when you feel good about something, regardless of the odds, you're going to get it done. In your case, even going through this year, you knew that writing was your passion. You knew that writing is a thing that makes you happy. And so therefore, regardless of what challenge you had to go through, or how difficult or not easy that was going to be, you still went ahead and did it, right? And so I think that's a key element, is that find something that will make you happy on doing that, and do more of that, right? And we always hear that, do the things that make you happy. Don't continue to do the things that don't make you happy and complain about it, because then you're not going to get nowhere, right? And so that's one message that I think is so critical for people to understand, right? Now, in terms of up until now, I guess, what has been your biggest lessons that you can relate to?
So my biggest lessons in terms of just resiliency in general, or in terms of
Yeah.
like how to, I when you're able to connect with other people, that is a huge help. For me, a big part of getting kind of back on the horse was connecting with other writers in Houston. While I was there, and we still have a writers group of just this little handful of us, even though we've kind of scattered to different places. We still keep in touch with each other, and these ladies, I hope I have conveyed to them how grateful I am. These ladies pulled me through a really dark time in my life, because even if I wasn't getting much done, I was still, once a month I went to a meeting, or we went to connected online in some way. So I was still, it was the lifeline to the author world. So when you're trying to be resilient, or trying to bounce back from something, the worst thing you can do is isolate yourself. And right now we're living in a world where we're all kind of isolated here
Yeah.
in 2020. But if you have internet access, you don't have to be totally isolated.
Got it. Yeah, no, that's definitely true. I mean, I think doing that sometimes I can actually even, especially if you don't have a good, I guess, you don't have a good control of your mental being, right? And what I mean by that is if you haven't worked on your mind, you haven't had that ability to practice on that. Being isolated can definitely bring depression. It can bring anxiety. It can bring all the things into your life. Whereas if you have exercised the mind, then even if you're isolated, it's not necessarily recommended. Even if you're isolated, though, you're not gonna fall into depression, or you're not gonna fall into some of those things because you can manipulate that in a different perspective, right? So, in terms of defining for you success, how will you define success?
And that's something that I kind of, I guess, I changed my mind on or wrestle with kind of continually. Um, what is success? When will I ever really be satisfied?
Yeah.
And I think the answer is probably I will never totally be satisfied. Because if I were satisfied, I'd stop making art, and I don't want to stop making art, so I don't want to be satisfied. I think if you are consistently doing the things that make you happy, if you have a roof over your head and enough to eat and family and friends that love you, then that is success. Whatever external rewards, those are the icing on the cake. Those are the things that you get up and the morning and try to do a little bit harder for, but that's not success.
Yeah, I love that actually. I really love that, and I think that's definitely talking to the people that are in the same, I guess, entrepreneurial journey is that a lot of times, again, success is not defined by a monetary aspect of that. Success is defined by doing the things that you love or the things that you like, and you kind of mentioned that. I also agree with you. It's like I think that you're never gonna get to a level where you stop, right? And this is actually even with anything, whether it's education or learning or any of that stuff. Like I feel like you're never gonna hit that point, and if you do, I believe that that's when you start dying slowly, right? Because now there's like, okay, well, what's my purpose now? Like, what am I gonna do now, right? And so for me, it's like I think that for me specifically, I would continue to do as much as I can, whether it's through any of the things that I do in empowering and motivating people, and just continuing that trend. Because the minute that I stop doing that, it's like, okay, well, what am I gonna do now, right? And it's like very similar to when I don't think you're ever gonna reach perfection either in anything, right? I don't think there's such thing as that. You can definitely set up a particular aspect of what you want to accomplish in life. So like, maybe on your point is like, hey, I want to, write 10 books in 1 year. Then you hit that goal and then you set up a new goal, right? And you keep growing, and you keep growing, you keep growing, you keep stacking versus saying, I've reached perfection. Now what? Again, we go back to the same question. What is my purpose now, right? Talking about books and writing, what have been your I guess your biggest challenges in becoming a book writer?
Um, well, there's a lot of challenges to unpack there. Almost everybody you meet, you tell them that if you tell them you're a writer, they'll say, "Oh, I really want to write a book," but it takes a lot of drive, because of all the people who say they want to write a book, maybe about 10% actually start writing. And of all the people who start writing, maybe 10% finish their book. And then there's the editing step, and then the step of either submitting to publishers or going through self-publishing, and can you actually market your book well? And so all of those are where people get winnowed out because they didn't have the drive, at least at that particular moment, to keep going. So there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot to learn. It looks easy because it looks like putting words on the page, and that's what, unless you have a disability or a lack of access to education, most people can put words on a page. But
Yeah,
it's the study of story, the study of refining those words, the study of the business side of the industry, that it's all much harder than one idea.
Yeah, and I can definitely relate to that. I mean, I myself have a couple of different books that I've written, and it's definitely not an easy thing to do. And so it takes that dedication, right? You want to be dedicated to that. So let me ask you this: why do you think, though? Because I think that the primary aspect and this year, when you're looking at writing a book, right, and it's beyond that, by the way, except when you look at it from that perspective, yeah, the marketing and all that stuff, those, I think that's the aftermath, right? That's going to be once you've written the book, once you publish the book, then you want to do all of the other stuff, right? Except, if you've published a book, most likely you're going to do some sort of marketing, whether it's good or bad, you're going to do some sort of marketing. I think the biggest challenge, as you mentioned, is that only a small percentage of people actually complete writing a book. So why do you think that's the case? Why do people start and not finish, or what happens that they lose interest or just the drive to do it?
Because I think a lot of people do kind of have this shiny idea in their head, and then they're confronted with the reality of a project that's going to take perhaps months, perhaps years to complete. A project that's probably turning out, as they start writing into the middle of the book, to be more complicated than they originally thought. So they either decide, oh, I'll come back to this later, or I need to study a little bit more, which is fine. Because a lot of writers, the first book they complete is not the first book that they ever tried to start. It certainly wasn't for me. That start, fail, try, fail cycle happens a lot before you can get a first completed draft. And my first completed drafts, I am also really glad they didn't see the light of day. I needed to keep trying and failing a lot more.
Yeah. And I think it kind of is sticking with that subject, whether it's a book or whether it's starting a new business, or whatever you're trying to follow through, right? It comes down to just keep trying and doing it and doing it and doing it. And I think that's where people lose interest, right? A lot of people start something and they feel like everything's going to be good, and then they start seeing all the challenges or the things that come with that they did not anticipate, and they might fail once, and they're like, all right, I'm gonna try it again, and then they might fail again, and then as you start failing more and more and more, that interest is you're losing that interest, where people don't want to continue to move forward, and they don't want to continue to push through. And I think that's really where it becomes that critical aspect, right? If you look at Edison, right, and the light bulb, it wasn't one try, it was 1,000 times, right? Or if you look at a lot of different people, you have to go through many different trials. How many? You never know. Like for me, it might be, we're doing the same project. For me, it might only be maybe 10 times, and for you, it was only the first time, right? Or vice versa. And so you just never know. You just got to continue to kind of move forward with that from that perspective, right? One thing that you have here, which I wanted you to elaborate a little bit more, is you said, don't judge yourself more harshly than you would other people. I felt a lot of guilt over how long it took me to get to writing again, but I would never have thought less of another person who had lived through the same circumstances and reacting in the same way. So can you elaborate more on that message? Because I think that's a very powerful message too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's something that's come to me that I think about both in terms of general resiliency, in terms of writing and the arts, and especially for parents. All of those types of people who have bounced back from something really difficult like a natural disaster, people who are artistically inclined, and parents all tend to really judge themselves very harshly. And so if listeners are hearing this and maybe thinking, gee, I tried and failed so many times, I should quit. Look back, would you tell somebody else that? Somebody else who lived through this experience came and told you their story. Would you be telling them the same things that you're telling yourself? If you are struggling as a new parent and you're getting frustrated, and you're not sure if you're handling the situation well, but you're trying really hard, and if a friend told you that, would you judge them? Would you tell them that they're a bad parent? Probably not. Have the same kindness towards yourself that you would towards a friend.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, definitely. And that's actually good because it also helps you with your own self-esteem, and it also helps you revalidate that, if somebody was to come to you with asking you for an advice, and you were to give them that advice, make sure that you follow that same advice in your own life, right? Let me ask you something. Are there things that you do on a day-to-day basis to kind of help you go about your day that you would consider either rituals or habits or things that you do that you must do every day that maybe you didn't do before, now you're doing?
Yeah, I've developed a few, especially during the pandemic, because just when you think like you're getting in a good group and something else happens that you need to adjust to. I won't say I have to do this every day, and this is something else that I've learned along the way. It's great to have these coping mechanisms, but you can't be completely dependent upon them.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was running every morning, and oh my gosh, I loved it. It burned off all my pandemic energy. I'm like, this is great. This is keeping me sane. I must run. And then I sprained my ankle and I couldn't run for 6 weeks.
Wow.
So yeah, have your coping mechanisms, but also be ready to pivot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fortunately, another one of my coping mechanisms was afternoon tea, and nothing has stopped me from making tea yet.
Okay. Yeah. So it's finding a little bit of interest in certain things that can help you, just kind of either get distracted or get refocused. I mean, I know some people, like I like to do daily affirmations. I like to, as much as I can, I'm not saying I do this every day. I try to do at least one kind of workout per day. Just allows me to put on some earphones and listen to some motivational speakers, or even audiobooks, or even podcasts, right? And so it's just creating something that I know for a fact I didn't do this before, a couple of years back when I took this journey. And so it's always good, I think, to create something that's going to bring some sort of positive distraction. I'm not talking about negative distraction. I'm talking about positive distraction that's going to help you in your own life, right? So, Connie, I have a couple more things for you before I let you go. Number one is, if people wanted to connect with you, where can they find you?
You can find me at bookechoes.com. And that's where I've got my podcast. I've got links to get a free copy of Writing Without Childcare, which is an ebook all about how to write without childcare, which a lot of us are doing perhaps a little more than we anticipated.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. What's your podcast about?
So the podcast is all things about writing and publishing, from the craft of writing to the marketing stuff to the work-life balance.
Awesome. Okay, good. And so, and then you have a couple more projects coming out. Are they normally just fiction, or what kind of projects do you normally do?
Yeah, so this fall has been a particularly busy one, even despite COVID. So I just had another cozy mystery come out. It's called A Villain in the Vineyard, and I've got a historical cozy, and the third novella in the modern cozy series also coming out before the end of the year.
Wow. So you're definitely been pretty busy.
Yeah.
So you know what, again, folks, that's another great, think about it from that perspective, right? We're in the middle of COVID as a recording of this video. And, I know that a lot of people were like thinking or saying that, well, I cannot do something, or I cannot do anything, during this time. And at the end of the day, is like, if you have an idea, if you have the drive, even if you're working on something else and something pops up in your mind, I would encourage you to try to see what you can do with that idea. Because even in down moments like this, we can definitely create something for the future, right? And clearly you've been doing something, although this is your line of work, either way, you're still creating something during the pandemic. And so I do believe that there's definitely a lot of opportunities, regardless of what's going on, right? So
Absolutely. But I'd like to add that two things. One is that some progress is always better than no progress. So even if due to like family situations and COVID, that you just can't do as much as you want, a little bit can help you hang on and satisfy that need. But also that it is okay to take a pause. That's something I wish that I had just mentally let myself do back during those dark days post Harvey. If I had told myself, okay, this is a pause and I will attempt to restart on this date instead of this indefinite nothing, it wouldn't have felt like such a failure. And it would have felt like an intentional mental health decision.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. So if let's just say some of the people that are listening to this recording, if they're going through some sort of challenge, whatever challenge that might be, what will be an advice you can give them that they can start overcoming that challenge?
Yeah, pretty much this. Just do as much as you feel comfortable and work up in small increments, as well as that, it's okay to make adjustments. It's okay to pivot, and it's okay to work in ways that aren't ideal, or take a rest when you need it. It's all of those are okay things, and none of them make you less of a writer, less of an artist, less of a whatever it is you are.
Yeah, I like that. And again, it goes back to take a little bit of an action. Some progress is better than no progress. And I'm sure you can relate to this maybe in a couple of different aspects. I remember when I first wanted to write my first book, I was talking myself out of it. I was like, one, I'm not a writer. Number two, who's going to read my book? Number three, who am I kidding? And, all these negative things came to mind. And it could be the same thing with any business, right? And anything you're trying to do is like, you're talking yourself out of it. And it wasn't until I changed what we talked about earlier. It's like, what makes you happy and what could be maybe one of those passions that you have. And when I realized that I wanted to empower, I wanted to motivate, I wanted to help out people, is that at the end of the day, I said, well, how about if I look at this project as a self-accomplishment? And if nobody buys it, that's okay. I did something good for me because it makes me happy, right? And so I went with that. And then the next thing came about. It's like, well, how did I start this thing, right? And so kind of going back to your point right now is start somewhere, right? Even in the content of a book, I always say, people that ask me about a book right now, I said, if you have an idea, write the title of the book, or write a chapter, or write a sentence, or write down a word. In other words, do something, don't do nothing. Even if you put a word down, you just started already. That's one step, right? And just keep creating that. So it goes back to what you said, which I love, is make sure that you have some sort of progress. That's so critical. So Connie, anything else before I let you go that you want to say to our listeners and viewers?
Just to kind of end on a really positive note, kind of touching back to what we said before about how a lot of people want to write a book and very few people manage.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, while few people manage to complete a book, anyone can be one of those few people. It just takes time and persistence.
Yeah, I love that. I definitely love that. So awesome, Connie. Thank you so much for being here on the show. Really appreciate you coming down and giving us some valuable information.
Oh, thanks. It was great to be on a chat with you.
Yeah, definitely. And for the rest of you guys, please make sure you check out Connie, her podcast. Come over here, leave us a comment, share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. You can find us on all platforms, and then you can also find us on YouTube. So I'll see you guys at the next episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. Have a good one. Bye.
Hi, I'm Cesar Espino, real estate investor, business coach, and consultant, and author of the book, You Can Overcome Anything, Even When the World Says No. My number is 424-501-6046. In my book, I talk about making the necessary changes to shift your mind for prosperity and certainty. Pick up your copy at Amazon. I also love helping families with their real estate and can purchase your house fast and all cash. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. My number is 424-501-6046.
Thank you for having me today. I am so glad you've tuned into this podcast. You can find me at your favorite podcast platform where you can like, subscribe, comment, and share. And to learn more about myself, my services, you can find me at www.cesarrespino.com, or you can also find me at your social media. Thanks for joining me, and I am looking forward to having you at the next episode. And know you truly can overcome anything.